She begged for bread in 7 different languages. But what the billionaire single dad did next left the whole courtroom in silence. Silas Whitmore had everything money could buy: private jets, skyscrapers, with his name etched into the glass, even a luxury vineyard in Sonoma. But none of it could fill the space left behind when his wife, Tessa, died in a car accident 3 years ago. Since then, he'd been living life on autopilot, pouring himself into business deals and raising his son Jared with calculated precision. Emotions were filed under distractions. Vulnerability was a locked drawer. He was a father, yes, but not the warm kind. More like a protector with a strict schedule. That night, as the city lights blurred past his tinted SUV windows, Silas was just trying to get home. A long board meeting had left him drained. Jared was waiting for him with the nanny, but something made him glance out the window as the vehicle slowed at a red light near Lakewood District, a part of town he usually avoided. At the edge of a convenience store parking lot, he spotted a little girl, thin, barefoot, no older than 7. She was standing by an overflowing trash bin, arms folded tightly around herself in the cold. Her lips were moving. Silas pressed the button to lower his window slightly. She was speaking, asking for something. "Excuse me, food, please," she murmured in English. Then, without pause, she repeated the same plea in Spanish, then French, then Mandarin, then Arabic, then Russian, and finally, to his disbelief, Latin. The sheer intelligence, the desperation, the discipline it took to memorize and deliver the same line in 7 different languages, he had never seen anything like it. This wasn't panhandling. This was survival, executed with surgical effort. He opened the car door, ignoring the driver's protest. "Hey," Silas said gently, stepping toward her. "What's your name?" She flinched at first, but didn't run. "Callista," she replied quietly. "I'm 7. I don't want money, just some bread." "Please." There was something in her tone, so rehearsed, so devoid of expectation, that it hit Silas like a punch to the chest. Not because she was poor, but because she was hopeless in a way he recognized all too well. He didn't know it yet, but this encounter was about to change not only her life, but his. Forever. Silas didn't hesitate. He reached out his hand, and after a long pause, Callista took it. Her fingers were icy cold, her grip uncertain, like someone who hadn't been offered kindness in a very long time. He led her carefully across the lot to a small 24-hour diner nearby, the kind of place that served black coffee and eggs all night. As they entered, the waitress gave Silas a puzzled glance, her eyes flicking down to Callista's bare feet. He said nothing, just nodded toward a booth. Callista sat on the very edge of the seat, her legs dangling, spine straight like a soldier in formation. Silas slid into the other side and handed her the laminated menu. She didn't touch it. "You can choose anything," he said. "Anything you want." Her eyes flicked to the waitress, then back to Silas. "Is it free?" "It is now," he replied. Only then did she cautiously reach for the menu, as if touching it too quickly might make the moment disappear. She stared at the pictures more than the words, then whispered, "Could I have eggs and toast?" Silas nodded. "And hot chocolate?" She looked stunned. "Really?" When the waitress returned with the food, Callista ate slowly, chewing each bite like she was memorizing the flavor, as if it might have to last her days. She didn't speak while eating, didn't fidget. Only after she was halfway through her plate did she glance up at him and say, "Thank you, mister." Silas watched her closely. There was something so precise about her. Measured speech, small movements, her eyes constantly checking the exits. She was alert in a way no child should be, like someone always expecting the worst. "Where are your parents, Callista?" he asked carefully. She didn't answer at first. Then her voice came out small but firm. "They're gone." "Anyone taking care of you?" She shrugged. "I stayed with my aunt for a while, then with a lady named Maureen, then other places, but people don't want me for long." Silas felt a hollow ache in his chest. "How long have you been on your own?" "I stopped counting," she said. "I learned not to stay in one place, and I don't steal. I just ask in different languages. Sometimes it helps." He leaned back in his seat. Her answer wasn't just smart. It was methodical, calculated, survival through adaptation. He pulled out his phone and texted his assistant, Rain Lavinia. "Urgent. I need you to run background and child welfare checks. 7-year-old girl, no ID, Speaks at least 7 languages. Possibly undocumented. Need options for emergency temporary custody. Call me immediately. Then he looked back at Callista. You know, you're kind of amazing, he said. She tilted her head. People say that when they don't know what to do with me. Silas gave a half smile. Maybe I don't, but I know I'm not letting you go back out there tonight. She stared at him, trying to read his face, looking for signs of danger, like a stray animal who'd been kicked too many times. Then, slowly, she gave the tiniest nod. It was the first moment of trust. And for Silas, it was the moment his carefully ordered life started to unravel, and finally, to matter. By the next morning, Callista was curled up on the far side of a plush guest bed in Silas's penthouse, wrapped in a warm fleece blanket. She hadn't said a word during the ride home. Not from fear, necessarily. More like she was conserving energy, watching, measuring. Silas stood quietly in the doorway, watching her sleep. The sight of a child resting safely in his home should have been comforting. But it wasn't. Not when he knew what it meant. That out there, someone had let this child fall through the cracks. No system had caught her. No one had cared enough. He didn't understand how a girl that bright, that disciplined, could be so utterly alone. By the time she woke up, Rain Lavinia had already arrived, her tablet in hand, sharp as always. Rain was more than an assistant. She was the closest thing to a human lie detector Silas had. She'd worked intelligence before taking over logistics for his business empire. No records on her, Rain said after running facial recognition, medical database searches, and school enrollments. No birth certificate, no state ID, nothing flagged in social services under the name Callista or anything close. Either she was never registered or she's been erased. Silas exhaled slowly. You believe her? I do, Rain said. You should have seen the way she asked me for permission to drink water. No child fakes that kind of broken. Downstairs, Callista sat with Jared, who was watching her with the wary curiosity only an 11-year-old boy could muster. He wasn't hostile, but he wasn't friendly either. He asked her if she liked video games. She shook her head. When he tried to offer her a controller, she quietly pushed it back. It wasn't that she disliked him, she just didn't know how to play. Instead, she asked to read. Silas led her to the library, and to his surprise, she picked out a thick copy of Le Petit Prince in French. She sat on the floor, legs crossed, reading silently. When he asked how she'd learned, she shrugged. A man at a church taught me, she said. He gave me old books when no one else was looking. I had to hide them. You read it fluently? She nodded. I like stories where small people change big things. That night, she had another nightmare. Silas heard her muffled cry through the hallway and rushed in. Callista was curled in a tight ball in bed, whispering in a language he couldn't place. When he gently touched her shoulder, she bolted upright, gasping for breath. It's okay, he said. You're safe. She blinked rapidly, trying to orient herself. Sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to be loud. You're not in trouble, Silas said. Ever. Not here. She stared at him, eyes wide. Not even if I cry? Not even then. From that moment, the shift began. Slowly, gently. She began to follow Jared into the garden. She helped the housekeeper sort books on a shelf. Once, Silas caught her reciting Shakespeare under her breath in perfect iambic pentameter. The girl was a sponge, but not just for knowledge. She was soaking up safety. But the closer she got to stability, the more dangerous the past became. Because someone, somewhere, had tried to erase her. And that kind of erasure doesn't happen by accident. Silas knew one thing for sure. Whoever had let her go hadn't expected her to survive. And they definitely hadn't expected her to end up in his house. 3 weeks after Callista moved into Silas's home, life had begun to take on a delicate rhythm. She had her own room now, painted warm yellow with a bed full of pillows she still didn't quite know what to do with. Jared had slowly warmed up to her. They weren't exactly siblings, but there was mutual respect. A silent understanding between two children who had seen too much too young. Silas had arranged for Callista to begin private tutoring at home. Within days, her tutor called, baffled. She's not just gifted, she's a polymath, the woman had said. She understands structure and language like an adult linguist. She taught me a few things in German today. Despite her growing comfort, Callista never spoke much about her past. Silas didn't push, but the questions burned in the back of his mind. Where had she learned all this? Who had raised her? And more urgently, who had let her go? One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled through the city, Silas received a call from Rain that changed everything. "You need to see this," she said, "now." In his office, she handed him a manila folder. Inside were grainy surveillance images from a police raid 2 years ago on a known trafficking ring that had operated under the disguise of a language foster care program for gifted orphans. Callista's face, thinner, eyes more hollow, was clearly visible in the background of one of the images. She was there, Rain confirmed. And this man, she pointed to a tall, smug-looking figure in the foreground, is Franklin Bryson. He claimed to be a state-licensed foster guardian, but the feds suspected he was using children for illegal labor, black market interpreting, and worse. Charges were dropped due to lack of testimony. No child ever came forward. Silas's jaw tightened. He's still out there? Yes. And as of this morning, he just filed a petition for custody over a minor named Callista, claiming she ran away from his care and that you kidnapped her. Silas felt the room tilt for a second. He knows she's here? Looks like it. Silas stood abruptly. We need a legal team, full custody motion, immediate protection filing, and tell security we're going on lockdown. But it was too late. The next morning, social services arrived at his door with a court order. Callista was to be placed into temporary state care until the matter could be resolved. Silas fought it, offered legal proof of guardianship intent, character affidavits, even direct intervention from his legal partners. But bureaucracy was brutal. I'm sorry, the woman from social services said, avoiding his gaze. Without formal documentation and with a counterclaim from a former legal guardian, we have to follow procedure. They took her away in a plain gray car. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at Silas from the back seat, her lips trembling, one hand pressed against the window. Jared stood behind his father, silent, confused, his fists clenched. That night, Silas couldn't sleep. He walked the hallways of his penthouse like a ghost, stopping once at the door to her room. The bed was still made, the books untouched. The yellow walls looked colder without her warmth. For the first time since Tessa's death, Silas felt powerless, but deep inside, that helplessness turned into something else. Resolve. If the system thought it could rip her away just like that, it didn't know who it was up against. Callista was placed in a temporary holding facility run by the state, an old, sterile building with flickering fluorescent lights and rooms that smelled like bleach and metal. They called it a transitional youth center, but in truth, it was a glorified cage. No warmth, no safety, just staff counting hours and kids learning to be invisible. Again. The first night, she was given a thin blanket and a bed with squeaky springs. She didn't complain. She'd learned long ago that silence attracted less trouble, but it wasn't the conditions that scared her. It was the return of that sinking feeling. The fear that maybe happiness had been a dream, that Mr. Whitmore and Jared were too good to be real, that maybe she didn't deserve to stay. The other kids noticed her right away. She was quiet, composed, strange. One girl, older, snorted when she saw Callista reading a book in Latin. "Think you're better than us?" she sneered. Callista didn't respond. She never looked up. But that didn't stop the whispering, or the shoves in the hallway, or the missing toothbrush. The workers rarely intervened. Most just assumed the quiet ones could take care of themselves. Back at the penthouse, Silas was a storm in a suit. Rain had never seen him like this, sleepless, snapping at staff, tearing through legal codes with bloodshot eyes. He'd hired a top-tier child advocacy lawyer, a former federal prosecutor named Monroe Talcott, and ordered him to prepare for the fight of a lifetime. Meanwhile, Rain dug deeper into Franklin Bryson. On the surface, he had licenses, clean records, even glowing references. But when she began cross-referencing tax records, shell companies, and off-the-grid housing reports, a darker picture emerged. "Got him," Rain finally said one morning, entering Silas's office like a woman carrying a live bomb. She placed a flash drive on his desk. Surveillance footage from one of Bryson's old homes, acquired by a whistleblower, buried in a closed investigation file. Silas clicked play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Children sat at desks, translating conversations through earpieces. Bryson walked between them like a conductor in an orchestra. Then, the camera angle shifted to a side room, a locked space with no windows. In the corner, huddled on a cot, was Callista. Thinner, Silent. Her lips were moving, reciting something under her breath. On the audio, Bryson could be heard laughing from the next room. Now, this girl knows more languages than anyone I've ever met, his voice crackled. Too bad I can't clone her. Silas's knuckles turned white. This is enough, he said. But Talcott shook his head. It's powerful, yes, but we still need Callista's testimony. That's what will break him. Silas hesitated. She doesn't talk about it. Not even to me. Then we need to give her a reason to. The very next day, Silas and Rain arrived at the center with a court-approved visitation. Callista was brought into the room slowly, hands fidgeting, eyes cautious. When she saw Silas, her posture didn't change, but her eyes filled with something just shy of relief. Are you okay? He asked quietly. She nodded. I need to ask you something important, he continued, kneeling down to her level. We found a video, a bad one, a video that proves you were hurt. But I need your voice, just once. You don't have to say everything, just enough. Callista looked at him for a long time. Then she turned to Rain. Will he go to jail? If you help us, Rain replied softly. Yes. The silence stretched. Callista's fingers curled around the hem of her sleeve. Then she said, I'll do it, but only if I can see Jared first. Silas smiled, despite the ache in his chest. Deal. That was the turning point. And in that moment, it became clear. She wasn't the one being rescued anymore. She was becoming the one fighting back. The courtroom was smaller than Callista expected. Not the grand kind from movies, but a muted, windowless chamber with beige walls and dull gray chairs. The fluorescent lighting made everything look sterile and too bright. Franklin Bryson sat confidently at the defendant's table, wearing a pressed suit and a smug expression. He gave Callista a half smile when she entered, as if daring her to speak. But she didn't look at him. She walked straight ahead, wearing the navy blue dress Rain had picked out for her, and sat beside Monroe Talcott, the attorney Silas had hired. Silas sat in the front row behind her, his hands clenched, Jared beside him, fidgeting nervously with the hem of his sleeve. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, called the hearing to order. Bryson's attorney launched into a calm, practiced argument, claiming that Callista had been under his care legally, that she had run away without cause, and that Mr. Whitmore had unlawfully harbored her. When it was Talcott's turn, he stood tall and quiet for a moment, letting the air settle. Then he played the footage Rain had uncovered. The room shifted. The screen showed Bryson walking through the illegal facility, the children hunched over desks, and then, the most damning piece, Callista, locked away, whispering to herself. The audio echoed, "Too bad I can't clone her." Bryson's expression didn't change, but his lawyer stiffened. Then came the testimony. Callista walked to the witness stand slowly, carefully. Everyone watched, expecting hesitation, but when she spoke, her voice was clear, controlled. I was kept in a locked room. I wasn't allowed to go outside. He told me I had to work because I was lucky enough to know things. He said if I didn't help translate, no one would feed me. The courtroom was silent. The judge leaned forward. And how many languages do you speak, Callista? Callista looked her in the eyes. 7 fluently. 3 more I'm still learning. There was a collective murmur in the room. The judge asked, Can you repeat what you just said in each of the languages you speak fluently? Callista nodded. She repeated the same sentence. I was held against my will and forced to translate conversations I didn't understand. In English, Spanish, French, Arabic, Mandarin, German, and Russian. Each one was perfect. The judge sat back, stunned, but Callista wasn't finished. She turned and looked directly at Bryson for the first time. In English, you called me a tool. In Arabic, you told someone I was disposable. In Mandarin, you said I'd break soon and you'd get a new girl. I understood every word. I always did. Bryson's smugness cracked. His lawyer asked for a recess. Denied. Monroe Talcott spoke next, calmly laying out every piece of evidence. Financial records of illegal payments, logs of child movements, shell companies, and finally, testimonies from 2 other survivors who had come forward after Callista's story went public. By the time closing arguments ended, there was no doubt. The judge stared long and hard at Bryson before rendering her decision. This court finds the claims of Mr. Bryson not only unsupported, but actively criminal. Custody rights are hereby revoked. Criminal proceedings are recommended immediately and effective immediately, Full legal guardianship of Callista is granted to Mr. Silas Whitmore. Gasps echoed across the room. Jared let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Silas closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them to find Callista watching him. She didn't smile. She walked over to him and placed her hand in his. Small, firm, no hesitation. They walked out together, not as billionaire and rescued orphan, but as father and daughter. The weeks after the court ruling felt like stepping into a new season of life, one with sunlight instead of shadows. Callista was no longer afraid of sleeping with the door closed. She no longer checked every room for exits. There were still nightmares sometimes, but they came less often, and when they did, Silas was always there before she woke up fully. Calm, quiet, present. The adoption papers were finalized quickly. Silas had made sure of it. Callista Whitmore was now her legal name. And for the first time in her young life, she belonged somewhere. Not as a guest, not as a burden, but as a daughter. Still, healing wasn't instant. One morning, when Jared offered to share his cereal with her, Callista flinched as if he were testing her. Later, when the housekeeper Maria tried to help her fold laundry, Callista insisted on doing it herself. Her way with military precision, as if perfection was the only thing keeping her safe. Silas didn't force change. Instead, he offered her something she'd never had before: time. When her tutor suggested a long break from formal lessons, Silas surprised both children with a plan. A world trip. Not luxury hotels or five-star getaways. This would be a journey through the places Callista had only known through fear. Spain, France, China, Germany, Egypt, reclaimed through joy. Their first stop was Seville, Spain. Callista was silent as they walked through narrow cobblestone streets lined with orange trees. But then a street musician began playing a familiar tune, and she quietly sang the words under her breath, in perfect Castilian Spanish. Jared joined her, off-key but smiling. Silas stood behind them, hands in pockets, doing nothing to stop the tears welling in his eyes. In Paris, Callista stood at the base of the Eiffel Tower, reciting poetry from memory. In Cairo, she helped an elderly vendor translate prices for tourists. In Beijing, she giggled while Jared tried to master chopsticks. Every country peeled away a layer of fear. Every language she had once used to beg now became a bridge to connect. By the time they returned home, Callista had filled 3 notebooks with sketches, stories, and journal entries. Rain encouraged her to try submitting something to a publishing contest. Instead, Callista asked if she could create her own book. For children who think they're invisible, she said, so they know someone sees them. Silas commissioned a team to help her design it. But the words, the heart, those were hers alone. One afternoon, she brought Jared a printed draft of her first story. He flipped through the pages, eyes widening. "This is really good," he said, really good. She shrugged, pretending to be casual, but her cheeks turned red. "I just wrote what I wish someone had told me." Later that evening, Silas found her sitting on the library floor, her usual spot. She looked up at him. "Do you think people like me can actually be happy?" Silas knelt beside her. "I think people like you show the rest of us how to become happy." She didn't respond, but for the first time since he met her, she leaned into him without hesitation, letting herself be held, not as a survivor, but as a child finally learning how to live. Exactly 1 year after Callista officially became a Whitmore, the family found themselves standing inside a crowded auditorium in Washington, D.C. The room was filled with reporters, foundation leaders, educators, and philanthropists, gathered for the International Children's Voices Summit, an event Silas had quietly funded through his charitable wing, though his name wasn't listed anywhere on the program. The final speaker was listed simply as C. Whitmore, 8 years old. There was murmuring in the audience. Some were skeptical, others were intrigued, but no one expected what followed. When Callista stepped onto the stage, the room stilled. She wore a simple cream dress with a navy ribbon, her hair braided down her back. A single spotlight lit her from above. She didn't carry notes. She didn't need them. She began speaking in English, slow, clear, each word holding weight far beyond her years. "I used to speak many languages because I had to. I had to ask for help in every way I could. Some people gave me food, most walked past. A few used me." The room went silent. She looked up, locking eyes with people in every row. But one man stopped. He didn't just feed me. He didn't just protect me. He listened. And because of that, I stopped being invisible, she continued, shifting languages between paragraphs. Spanish, French, Mandarin, Arabic, German, Russian. With each transition, the crowd gasped a little louder. The rhythm of her voice became music, haunting, beautiful, undeniable. I am not just a smart child. I am not just a rescued one. I am someone who deserved safety from the beginning. Every child does. We should not have to prove we are valuable. We are. When she finished, the entire auditorium rose to its feet. The applause went on for minutes. Reporters wiped their eyes. Educators stood stunned. From the wings of the stage, Silas stood with Jared and Rain, his expression unreadable, because no emotion was large enough to contain what he felt. Afterward, Callista was surrounded by people, ambassadors, nonprofit directors, school officials, all eager to meet her, to praise her, to ask how they could help. But she slipped away before they could get too close. Out on the steps of the building, in the soft glow of dusk, she found Silas waiting. "You didn't stay for the crowd," he said. "I didn't say it for them," she replied. "Who then?" She looked up at him. "For the girl who's still out there, whispering in 7 languages, hoping someone listens." Silas knelt in front of her, his eyes searching hers. "And what would you tell her now?" Callista didn't hesitate. "I'd tell her that the world is not always cruel, that one person can change everything, and that she is not broken. She is becoming." He smiled, and this time she smiled too. Not politely, not cautiously, but fully. Then Jared ran down the steps, holding a copy of her printed storybook in his hands, the first edition of The Invisible Girl Who Spoke the World Awake. They walked home together through the city streets, hand in hand, a family stitched not by blood, but by something deeper. And behind them, echoing in the distance, was the sound of hope beginning to speak in every language. This story, at its core, is not just about rescue, it's about restoration. Callista is not a symbol of pity, but of unimaginable resilience. She embodies what happens when survival transforms into strength, and strength evolves into purpose. Her journey reflects the quiet, often unseen battle that many children endure in the margins of society. Children whose intelligence and spirit go unnoticed simply because they don't have a place to be heard. Silas, a man once disconnected from feeling, finds redemption not through grand gestures, but through presence, patience, and choosing to stay when it would be easier to walk away. His evolution from a protector to a true father shows that love is not about perfection, it's about consistency. And Jared reminds us that healing is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's in small, shared moments, like laughter over cereal or silent understanding in a hallway. The ending isn't perfect because life never is, but it is true, a hopeful truth. It reminds us that even the most broken beginnings can give rise to voices strong enough to wake the world. And sometimes, all it takes is one person listening.